So this is the second in the series of videos about queries and what we can do with them. And again, come back to the database that has a single table. And this time what we're going to do is to create our own search screen, which will allow us to either to type in or select what we want to search for rather than relying on Access. But first of all, a bit of a review. Creating a query, we go to Queries. This time, as always, we're going to try and use the wizard. And I'll select some information about my book, just 2 or 3 things there, and the subject name, and this time I'm going to call it Subject Search because we're going to be doing some searching. Tell it finish, and again we get our subset of data here, which is quite useful, and again we'll be showing you how to get data from a multiple of tables a little bit later on. So I'll just close that down and go into Design View, which we've seen before. And in the last video, what we did, the most complex thing we did, was to add a set of square brackets here and to say which subject do we want to search, a question mark in there, and then when we ran that query we could choose a subject, and our favourite, economics, and we get just the economics books there. But again, we're relying very much on Access to do all the hard work, and this time I won't bother to save it. And I'm going to show you how to do something a little bit more complex this time by using a form. So we'll go to Forms, and dangerous now, we're going to create a form in our own in DIY mode in Design View, and I'll just tell it to create a very simple form there, which you can see is called Form 1 at the moment, and we'll have to remember that because we're going to use it later. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, from the toolbox, I'm going to drop a text box on there into which we're going to type the subject we want to search for, and you can see this thing is called text 0, and again we're going to have to remember that one. And what we're going to do is to use whatever we type into this text box to search or act as a parameter for our query, the value that we're going to pass into our query. So having now got that, what I'll do is to save that table. I realise it's not particularly adventurous at the moment, and I'm going to call it Form 1 just because it's fairly easy for us to remember. You can call it whatever we like a little bit later on. We'll go OK and close it down. Go back to our query and take our subject search query into Design View, and down here in our criteria line, instead of as we did before just typing the thing into square brackets, we're going to make it a little bit more adventurous and say we want to pass the value that we type into that text box on Form 1 and place it in here automatically. Now I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit because there's a bit of a big formula going in here, and see if you can stick with this. Now the first thing we do is square brackets, which we're quite used to. Then the word forms has to be placed in the square brackets, followed by an exclamation mark, followed by square brackets again, and this is where we put in the name of the form that we've just created, and in our case it was Form 1. Close the square brackets. So far we've got the words forms, exclamation mark, Form 1, which is the name of our form, exclamation mark again, stick with it, and in square brackets we now put the name of the text box that we had, which if I remember correctly was called text 0, and close the square bracket. So we've got the word forms, then the name of our form, and then the name of our text box, and that's the structure that you'll be using all the time. So what I'm going to do now is to save that query, and there we go, and close it down. And what I'm now going to do on our form is take the form and look in Design View. Now our query is going to take whatever we type into this box here and feed it into the query and then produce the results that we have in our table form, because we'll need to tell it to do that searching. And as with most programs, what I'm going to do is to throw a button on here like this, and that's going to be our search button. And then what we're going to do is to take a miscellaneous option from this particular category, and we're going to tell it to run a query. That's our query with the value that we're about to type in. So here we go, and we're going to go next. It's going to ask us which one of the queries do we want. Well, we've only got one, that's called subject search, so I'll go next again. And what we can do now is have a picture on a button, very simply, and to make it very quickly, you can see the example over here. I'm going to say search, just to make it look very professional, So I put search on there. Just going to get this out of the way. And oops. What we'll then do is to tell it next. It says, what do you want to call the button? Well, I'll call it search button. You can actually leave it as command, whatever it was, if you want to, but get used to calling it something. And then go finish. So what we've now got is a search button on our form, and let's go from this point onwards. And what I'm going to do now is to make this form work. So let's save it first of all. Go into view mode there. See now what we've got here. I've forgotten to change that title there, but we can do that later on. Type in here the subject that we want, and again let's stick to econ because we know that works. Click on the search button, the query runs, and up comes all of our economics books. And just to prove that wasn't a fluke, let's close down that one, and I'll type in one of the different subjects we had, which was biology, and we go search, and this time we just get biology books coming up.